I was waiting for you to say something. However, story one: student loan NANS demands ASUU's removal from the board. Like I mentioned, government in motion. So much is being done with this new presidency. And what is clear is that almost on a daily basis now, there is an issue. There is a point that this administration is trying to send a message to the people. However, in some of the many visits to the presidency, after the presidency had signed in the student loan bill, Nance, the current Nance executive, visited, and in the midst of their discussions, some of the highlights were regarding their view on um, the board assessments or the board members for the student loan. And they mentioned that in two ways. One, that they were not okay with the fact that they were not present in that board, that they wanted the board to have student representation. Secondly, that there were some institutions within the board that they felt should not have been there, like the MBA as well as ASU.
I don't know the problem with
Um,
the NBA. I understand
yes.
that ASU are their best friends, so
So
it
they
makes
said
sense.
those two organizations already had microfinance banks that they run their own affairs. That this is a student's loan, in quote, bank. That it should be uh, in their best interest that they are well represented. Now the president did respond. He acknowledged what they had to say and then told them, well, that he would consider, whilst he asked them to actually keep their unity in view because as a divided house of students, they can't really do much. I think that was coming on the back of the election that they just had in Nance, and the fact that it came with a bit of rancor and that he literally had to step in during the
It's
campaign season to um, to settle that. Now, the point is, the student loan initiative by this presidency to support indigent students in ensuring that
Devo,
students.
you're skirting around the issue.
I'm coming.
No, let me.
Let me land. Now, the truth is, you have the students saying that they want to be party to the board, and the truth is, it's unfortunate that our institutions have so failed that most times those who are meant to be recipients always literally have to fight their way into presence.
Where's Nance?
They have
I
to
mean,
demand.
what happened during the engagements that led up to the passage of the student loan bill? I think first and foremost,
Mhm.
let's just X-ray how this came into force. This isn't a law that was proposed during the life cycle of this new administration. This is a holdover from the previous administration. I was having conversations before we went on air actually with
Mhm.
Mr. C, and there is actually a debate right now going on as to the legality, right, of the law because the law had been, I mean, the bill had been on President
Right.
Buhari's desk for him to sign, right? He did not sign the bill into law before he left office. And this was the work of the Ninth National Assembly. And there are actually principles of administrative law as well as legislative practice that actually, in a way, could preclude a successor president from signing a particular bill into law, which was meant to be the
Well, I
prerogative
guess
of
the
his
the tenth
predecessor.
assembly will
I'm
take that up if that's an issue for them.
Yeah,
You know.
precisely. But I'm just like a lot of engagement and a lot of work clearly went into putting together this bill. Where was Nance throughout that process? If they were able to get an audience with the president in order for them to express their grievances, now what happens to all of the legislative engagement when this bill was going through legislative committees, when it went through its customary first, second, and third readings? If you can have an executive type level of engagement with the president over priorities that you think are your concern, why can't you engage with the National Assembly while
Okay.
this is being put together?
Well, the truth, like I mentioned in this story, right? This story is all about how they raise their own views, and it is the views of Nance, right? Nance literally hasn't been functioning as they should prior to this time because of how, well, I wouldn't call it compromise, but how politicized they have become. I mean, everybody knows the role that they played, both past and present execs, with the during the election of this administration. However, like I said, and I think we'll see that in many other cases of whereby institutional breakdown has led to people literally always having to put their issues at the front of the table to the extent that even those who are meant to administer it. They want to be part and parcel of the board. I don't see students asking to be on the board of universities, be on the board of different government bodies abroad, or just in the name of we want to be sure that we were well represented. And that's why you see them even looking at stakeholders that should be there in terms of legalities and school administration, like ASUU and MBA. In their own view, they're not relevant.
The only point I will make is, as from my perspective, we can critique Nancy's view on this. I don't think this is the time. It's too late in the game. Obviously, laws can be amended. I've talked about the fact that Nance may have a backstop in terms of, potentially challenge the legality, right, of this law and how it came into force. But if you're talking about engagement and trying to put your perspectives forward, there is a process through which laws are made in a democratic setting. Engage with that process. Engage at that level. I understand that they've been distracted with, politics and dynamics. Nance has actually been a distracted association, organization, whatever it is, body, right, for 9 or 3 decades, right? So I understand all of that. It just is too late in the game for them to be trying to make a political meal about something where they had ample time and ample opportunities for them to get their opinions and perspectives, right?
Right, well, let us get your opinions and perspectives as well. 0809 440 That is the WhatsApp number. We're also streaming live on our YouTube channel. It's Smooth 981 FM Lagos. And you can post a comment on there as well. Our next story comes from The Guardian. Now, the General Secretary of the NLC, Emmanuel Ugwaja, at the International Labour Conference in Geneva, has stated that minimum wage negotiations will begin in the last quarter of this year.
Yes, so the NLC has made it clear, right, that with the end of this is actually the first time I'm on freshly pressed since fuel prices went up. God, I felt it on the commute too.
Oh, wow.
That whole year today. Yeah, but so the NLC has clearly made it clear that with the end of the subsidy regime, with the fact that this government has, certainly with its initial moves, has made, aggressive or at least quasi-aggressive economic reform a priority, that workers, especially those on minimum wage, right, should also be given priorities in terms of creating those social mechanisms and those social cushions, right, to sort of smoothen out the body blow of 488 naira per liter, and it's surreal. I feel like I feel out of body. And it's something that I've called for 4 years, but I mean, it still feels
The reality.
It's a very out of body experience,
Oh, wow.
right? Yeah, dealing with that. And Tinubu has actually met with the NLC, I think, at least once. I think.
No. The committee.
Oh yeah, the committee rather, right? Has met with the NLC was But what's clear is that ASUU Rock is committed to engagement, and the NLC right now has decided to, put their guns down metaphorically, and see what sort of plan they can come up with the government. And so, with a lot of industry watchers, a lot of economists with the markets really expecting movement on on forex, movement with respect to the value of the naira, and just forex management in general. There's still a few body blues, right? To expect to Zibby prep up. But secondly, and more importantly, government has to be clear about the fact that there are hundreds of millions of Nigerians that need some sort of support in order for us to navigate through this, painful but necessary, right, economic adjustments. And so this is good news, and I don't often use good news and the NLC in the same breath, but this is good news in the sense that both government and Labour are committed to at least talking about this, and talking about this early enough in the administration's
last
life.
quarter of 2023 is not early.
No. It's early in terms of,
Because
the president became president in Q2.
with your own
Right.
confession, you felt it on your way here. That means we, the people, are getting the immediate impact, whilst government is taking their time.
Okay, so ideally, what should have happened is that the end of the subsidy regime should have been accompanied with some sort of announcement, right, or some
Balancing
sort of
act.
imminent launch, right, as to that. But for me, I would take some movement in 2023 over movement in 2024. Take note, when was the last time the minimum wage was reviewed? I think it was in 2018.
No.
Was
Just
it?
recently, the 30,000, which went to naught because
Right,
of
right,
the
right. So it
inflation.
was, yeah. So it took at least 5 or 6 years for the minimum wage to move under the last administration. And the thing is this, functionally, it moved from 18 to 30,000. I love to remind people that inflation adjusted, that 30,000 is actually worth less
18.
than the
Oh
18,000 that it
no.
came from. So, another thing to actually look out for with respect to this, and this is the last thing I would say, is that the only kind of minimum wage adjustment that would make sense would be a really, really radical one. So if you're moving from 30 to say 40 or 50,000, I don't think that moves the needle, far enough. And so that in the end may be the sticking point. The sticking point may not be should the minimum wage be increased. It will be a question of
By how much?
by how much.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's where a lot of politics may circle around.
All right, the WhatsApp number, let us know what your thoughts are. 0809 440 and you can also tweet at smooth981. The hashtag is freshlypressed981, or just post a comment on the live stream up on our YouTube. Just search for smooth981. From Punch. Now, the National Agency for the Prohibition of Trafficking in Persons says about 25,000 trafficked Nigerian women and girls are trapped in Mali.
Oh
He
my.
reached the pause.
It reached the pause. Oh my goodness. Well, I was going to skip this story, but you see, we were all for the women. And when I say women, we're talking about empowerment at every level for our girl child and also our women folk. Because literally, if there's anybody who has been marginalized in Africa, in Nigeria, it's the women. Now, one of the organizations that is leading the charge and the challenge from a different side is NAPTIP, that's the National Agency for Prohibition of Trafficked Persons. And one of the areas that's hardly spoken about is what takes place in human trafficking, especially of women and girls. It's huge on this continent, especially from Nigeria. I mean, there's no gainsaying, or it's not hard to understand the link between 200 million people, with about 60% of them averagely, that's the women and girl child. That's literally above 120 million human individuals. Now, because of the poverty levels and the what I call it, almost decrepit state of the judicial and legal system, many of these women and girl children are marginalized, and not just marginalized, they're being abused. And what NAPTIP and some of the government agencies have discovered is the huge numbers that are being trafficked in different ways and from to different countries. Now, there was a media conference that they held just to raise awareness on this aspect recently in conjunction with the International and Ibro-American Foundation on Administration and Public Policies. Now, their investigation revealed that there are almost over 25,000 Nigerian women and girls trapped in Mali. And although there's some information here that is needs to be verified in terms of they're saying that the Malian people enjoy Nigerian people. But I think prior to this time, some of the news that was on this human trafficking was that even when they were in Mali to try and get some of these girls out, many of the girls rejected the offers by the government to bring them back into the country. And this was at the time that this Japa syndrome was developing. Japa is not just about going to school or going abroad to find a job. Some people, because they don't have those means, revert to some of these subterranean means by either accepting offers to be house girls or to pick up one menial job or the other, and then they end up realizing that it was actually a ploy to be trafficked, and then they get trapped. Now, what they did say on record was that the native director, that's Professor Fatima Waziri Azi, was that there were top 5 countries that have been reported with the huge numbers of human trafficking from Nigeria. At the top of the list was Libya, where we all know the stories of how each time government has to go and repatriate people. United Arab Emirates. I guess this comes as a surprise to many, but if you've been traveling and you know what goes on in Dubai, Abu Dhabi, etc., you will know how some Nigerians and how they get there, and it's always like, how did you get here, and what are you doing? How come you're in this condition? Ghana is number 3 on the list. Cote d'Ivoire, number 4, and then India. And this brings to 4, and it's both males are included, but obviously women and children are the highest. Many times when people get some of these strange offers, conspicuous offers that, oh, we can give you something in this country, you will be this, you will earn that. Do your best to do the research, do your best to ask questions, do your best to have some kind of guarantor or guarantee to be able to verify these things, because at the end of the day, these are just the cases that NAPTIP has been able to get a hold of. That means there are many, many more cases of people who are trapped in these cases that cannot get help out of these places. By and large, it's a fallout of the state of the nation, the economy, and governance. The long responsibility is still on Nigerians and its own government to ensure that we create the environment for Nigerians to be able to live comfortably without having to seek some of these undeserving opportunities and getting defrauded, mutilated, and trafficked in the long run.
All right, you're listening to Freshly Pressed on Smooth 98.1. Do stay with us. The conversation continues. You can keep the messages coming. You know the numbers. And of course, you can also tweet at Smooth981. Stay with us.
Are we on camera?
To be honest,
Are we on camera?
Sorry?
Are we on camera?
Yeah, we are.
yeah, we are. Why?
Kilo day.
What happened?
Should we go?
We have literally 40 seconds.
The electricity has been pulled. The plug has been pulled. No.
Maybe it's talking about your energy levels.
No, not.
So I want to say
We will after the.
Okay. After the show.
that's a very good state of mind to revive.
No, she's
Well
already there.
She's already there.
She's already there. So I'm like, now wow.
Just want to say, Natuk is doing the hell of a
But
job.
we they do 1-1 though, because we want to finish.
Really?
So worst case, yeah, just
10
just
seconds.
When did we start finishing
Yeah.
stories? Yeah, I'll be up there. Let's finish this.
This is Freshly Pressed on Smooth 98.1. Our analysts are in. It's Devoe and Ikemesit. We've got about 10 minutes to go, and we'd love it if you're part of the conversation. WhatsApp number is 0809 440 981. And we're streaming live on YouTube, so you can catch the live stream on there as well from The Guardian. Now, experts and stakeholders in the agricultural space are calling for a complete overhaul of the CBN's Anchor Borrowers Program. And according to reports, about 500 billion naira has been lost to the Anchor Borrowers Program.
Yeah, and so a lot of this has happened because, according to the IMF, only 24% of the amount that has been disbursed to farmers to get things like seedlings, fertilizers, and all of that has been repaid. I know that quite some time ago, first Kano and then I think Sokoto were in the news because there were tens of thousands of farmers in those two states that just flat out refused to repay their loans. Part of the issue had to do with the messaging around this. It seemed in the rush to get the ABF office fees. Many farmers were actually not told that they would have to repay the funds.
So how is it a
No,
loan?
this is something that we had on the ground.
Okay.
So it's I mean, think about it. Anchor Borrowers debuted in the prelude to the 2019 elections, right? And so there were people that said, yeah, they're saying it's a loan, but I mean, elections, yeah,
Yeah, it was politicized.
yes, and all of that stuff, and the scheme itself was politicized, also in terms of its operation. It debuted in certain strategic states. I don't think it's even up to now. I'm not sure it's national. I don't think it's broadly applicable.
A fair
in every
point,
state.
because the recipients they
Right.
seem to cut across everybody.
Well, yeah,
Not everybody that applied got, and that's where
Yeah,
you now
there's
start to
that.
get that perception.
yes, and there was a very heavy geographic concentration, right? Yeah, of recipients, and so um, this has been a problem for a while. The issues around, repayment and all of the problems, right, in terms of keeping the scheme, economically viable, has been a thing for almost 2 years now. So this isn't exactly news. Maybe the only part that's significantly different, right, is the fact that the number now that the program has lost is 500 billion. It was, a lot less than that before now. All the same, this, I think in the end, the ABP should be a test case. It should be a lesson in how not to structure, you know, e- economic intervention schemes, right? It's always good if it is as devoid of politicking and politics, right, as much as possible, where you don't have a situation where lawmakers are competing amongst themselves to see who can get more of their. To be fair, lawmakers are technically allowed to do that, but you had a situation where lawmakers were really, really competing amongst themselves up to the point where they made it, part of their campaign storm speeches. Where I was like, yes, I got, 5,000 people from
I
this
even wanted
constituency on the
to
Ankoboras. Yes, yeah, I know Zibby's her
I-
look
I-
is priceless, but that's what happened.
yeah, it's what happened, and it's unfortunate because, like you mentioned, how not to structure a scheme. However, literally all schemes have been structured this way, and it's unfortunate that this is
Yeah,
the state of our governance, whereby everything and anything that is meant for the good of the people. I mean, look at all the money involved. Look at all the farmers in quotes that were put in mind as to how we would not just benefit them, empower them.
mhm,
Now, you're not meant to stay where you were when the loan got to you. You're meant to improve. But what happened? It was politicized. It turned into a ploy or a tool to get people to stay on one side of the divide. So that's when most of them felt that the loan was not a loan, but they took it as a grant that was for their own benefit. And in most cases, it wasn't even used for farming.
exactly. That
Many
was the
of
last
them,
point I was going to make.
many of them went on and married extra wives or
Yep,
expanded their fleet of cars
yep,
or decided to do what they wanted to do.
yep.
Now, it's not just ABP so that we don't murder them alone. You have the
The
conditional cash,
conditional transfer,
you
cash
have the
transfer.
trader money,
Yeah,
you have the market cash conditional transfer, all manner of schemes, interventions that at the end of the day, if we ever attempted to do a forensic audit, I know many people don't like that word, I'm sure we would not leave the studio. And
are we the ones that don't do the forensic audit?
Probably
Anyway.
not.
let's leave it at that.
Right.
Okay, I've got a message. This is from Gilbert, and he says, on the situation of young women and girls being trafficked across to Mali and other countries, it dates back to 93, 94 till date. The question is, what is the root cause of this unending challenge? We need to be sincere with ourselves. We need to address the subject of poverty, amongst other things, starting from the local government areas. From Punch, the Nasarawa State chapter of the Nigerian Medical Association has issued a 21-day strike ultimatum. This is to the state government, and it's over the poor welfare packages of doctors across the LGAs in the states.
Unfortunately, as with new government, you start to hear things that have been, as they say, let sleeping dogs lie. But honestly, in Nigeria, we should expunge that statement. Sleeping dogs should not lie. The truth and hard facts should be brought up so that we can deal with them. In Nasarawa, the doctors have threatened a 21-day strike, or we'll call it a 21 strike ultimatum. So in 21 days, if the government does not respond to them, they will go on strike. And what they're saying is that the packages for doctors across the 13 local governments has been negated. Now, Nasarawa did get a new governor, right? So this is homework for him at the front of his table. And doctors, and it's not just doctors, you have a whole medical care system of doctors, nurses, lab scientists, and co who represent the healthcare system. Now, at the top of the list, they're saying that one, that there was no there was non-implementation for promotion for doctors, no salary, annual salary increments, no implementation of the minimum wage and consequential adjustments, no implementation of the reviewed hazard allowance, and accrued 17 months arrears of the hazard allowance. That almost dates back to, that's almost 2 years and a half. That's bordering from the time that we had COVID. And then a high burden of taxation on doctors, and then the medical residency training fund payments. We read this over and over and over and over when it concerns healthcare workers And sometimes you kind of wonder, beyond the fact that some actually believe, oh, they're just fighting for themselves. If you need to be in the system, you need to actually be a practitioner to understand that you're putting your life at risk as a health practitioner. And the fact that there's no safety or precaution for them through some of these policies to be able to protect them or encourage them. Because most of the time, since we don't have enough, many of them are working many hours beyond the recommended. Well, this is at the table of the Nasarawa State new governor. I'm hoping that just like the presidency is trying their best on a daily basis to address some of the issues that are blown out, the Nasarawa State government will set up some kind of state of emergency to address their issues. And I'll say this before we close about Nasarawa. Nasarawa is deemed as one of the poorest states in the country. Unfortunately, Nasarawa actually is the deposits of some of the richest solid minerals in Nigeria. So it's unfortunate that one of the poorest states, in true hard fact, is the richest state in this country. That's some food, not just for thoughts, some homework for the Nasarawa State government and people to think about and act on.
From Vanguard, we have about 2 minutes to go. More than 100 have been reported dead in a boating accident in Kwara State.
Really sad. I think the state police commissioner in Kwara actually said right now the confirmed death toll is 103. These were residents who were returning from a wedding just across the Niger River in Niger State, who drowned in Patigi local government area. There were about 300 passengers who were on the boat, and unfortunately, this is an all too common experience. There was earlier in the year there was a similar boat mishap, I think in Kebbi, as well. Our internal waterways infrastructure right now is inadequate. Many of the boats don't meet minimum safety standards in Nigeria, let alone anywhere else, right? In the world, they are often overloaded. There's very little rescue, right? There's very little rescue and support services, and especially now during the rainy season where our rivers are swollen and in some places,
Zero
there are floods,
infrastructure.
it's just more treacherous, right? And being on our waters. I think in May I did the ferry ride from Calabar to Oron, and our boat got stuck
No
in
way.
the water because rain caught us there.
You saw it.
Yes, and there was no network coverage. I literally have the videos now. It was a really scary experience.
That's a great reality
Right.
show.
Yes, and unfortunately, that is the experience right across the country. Right, in a situation where we are talking about building out and investing in infrastructure, waterways infrastructure is part of that. I think a lot of us are so focused on air, and
Land.
particularly road and rail, and we forget that
The ocean
yeah,
economy.
the waterways right exist, and so hopefully something gets done about this. I think that's where I'm going to leave it. But really sad.
All right. Well, thank you so much for listening. Thanks for your messages, and special thanks to our analysts. It's Devoe and Ikemesit joining us on Freshly Pressed this morning. Do stay with us. There's a lot more to come on the Smooth Breakfast.
The headlines, the stories,